The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls, greetings. Welcome to another presentation in this public service nation-building series, The Law and You. This is program number 855. Coming to you on Monday, the 13th of March, 2017. On this program, I will speak to you on the topic, the election petitions. But before getting into the topic, a few preliminary comments. Firstly, and as usual, my deepest condolences go out to the families which have suffered recent bereavements, particularly the two families who lost men by electrocution in different circumstances, both accidental, tragically, and the family of the gentleman who was shot last evening. How sad. Then let me congratulate the Starlift Steel Orchestra on the launch of activities to mark its 50th year of existence. Let me say how much I and my family enjoyed the service at the Kingston Methodist Church yesterday afternoon. Even though the turnout was not as big as it should have been, those of us who were privileged to be there had a wonderful evening. Starlift was launched in 1967, and this year, 2017, marks the 50th year of their existence. Those of you who listened to this program last week would recall my saying that my ties with Starlift stretch back to 1973, when Starlift became the first steel orchestra to play at a wedding in a church, when they played at the wedding of myself and Mrs. Campbell on the 15th of December 1973 at the Kingston Methodist Church. Thanks to the Reverend Gans, who approved the band playing, and thanks to Tanny Peters, now departed, who made all of the arrangements. Now, since that time and after marriage, and we lived briefly in Old Montrose, and then when we returned from England, we lived again in Old Montrose. I maintained close ties with Starlift Orchestra, and during my political career, I was their parliamentary representative. So I'm very close to the band, and Sado is my good friend. Taught him in grammar school as well. The service yesterday was well organized. Both junior and senior players were there playing alternately. And I must commend Brother Monty Maul. Now Monty is a boss preacher, not just one of our top businessmen, but to hear Monty deliver a message is always something that blesses your heart. And yesterday, Monty was in top form. He clearly was inspired by the occasion, by the heavenly music played by Starlift, and Monty was in his element. And of course, Mrs. Maul was there to smile and give him encouragement. So to all the members of Starlift, especially the active players, I say congratulations. And I look forward to hearing about other events you would have in the course of the year. And I look forward, wherever possible, to be present. I had the honor of being there with Mrs. Campbell and all four of our children who are in St. Vincent. We had Bantu, Alpha, Daniel, and Mandela. And of course, Bantu's spouse and his son, and Daniel's fiancée. We were there as a big family, thrilled. And thank you, Starlift. And I hope the public would support Starlift in its endeavors. In the history that was recited, we heard that they had won 21 trophies so far at the senior level and 10 at the junior level. And that is really something for an institution that has been going for 50 years. Now, tomorrow, the 14th of March, will be celebrated here as National Heroes Day. I do not know if tomorrow would be the occasion on which the government would take the opportunity to announce additional national heroes, but for the time being, our single national hero is the Right Excellent Joseph Chattoyer, His Excellency Joseph Chattoyer, and the events, as usual, would take place at the obelisk at Dorsetshire Hill. In fact, just a few yards away from this studio, at the top of Dorsetshire Hill. And as usual, those who can't make it would be able to follow the proceedings on radio and live on television. Okay, that's it for preliminaries. Let me now get into the topic for the evening, the election petitions. Excuse me. Now, I must say that to those of us who consider ourselves neutral patriots, as I consider myself, the situation with the election petitions is disappointing. Now, elections were held on the 9th of December 2015, which would be 15 months ago. And there are still 2 outstanding petitions in the court system which have the potential to result in a change of government. I say potential because if the courts were to rule in favor of the opposition in both petitions, the 8-7 majority which the government now has would become a minority, and the government would have to resign, relinquish office, and call fresh elections if the petitions are successful. If the opposition is successful indeed in one of the petitions, and the court rules that there must be a fresh election in a particular constituency, then of course there is still the potential for change. But in those circumstances, if there are by-elections held and the government wins the by-elections, or one of them, then the government could still continue to be in office with an 8-7 majority. The point is that 15 months after voting, we still have the possibility of an electoral upset. There is only one word that can be used for that situation, and that word is instability. Because wherever there is a threat to the existence of a government, by definition, that government becomes unstable in that many people would not have full confidence that the government is going to last the distance. So that it does nobody any good to have this state of uncertainty being prolonged. But prolonged it has been. I can't say that I have seen all of the documents filed by the two sides in this dispute. I have seen some of the documents filed, particularly in the early days, but I rely on the newspaper reports to inform me as to what is going on. And I must commend Eyewitness News, and I want to draw attention to some articles in Eyewitness News for keeping us up to date. Now, those of us who follow Eyewitness News, as I have been, and what I normally do, I print out interesting articles from time to time. I want to just give you the headlights and perhaps a passage or two from the articles published in Eyewitness News dealing with the petitions. And the headline of the first one, NDP election petitions struck out. This came up after the hearing before Justice Cottle when the petitions were thrown out. Then on the 29th of September 2016, there was an article in Eyewitness News, NDP says appeal of election petitions ruling will be heard. And I quote, the main opposition, New Democratic Party, has sought to assure the public that its appeal of the decision of the High Court to throw out its election petitions as improperly filed will in fact be heard. Now, that article came about because you will recall when the Court of Appeal was about to come to St. Vincent, it was announced that the appeal from the NDP against the throwing out of its election petition was not listed for hearing. And I will deal with briefly with the reason given at the time. So that was that. Last week Wednesday, this story appeared on Eyewitness News. Breaking, appeal court reinstates NDP election petitions. And the story said, the opposition New Democratic Party's election petitions have been reinstated. The Court of Appeal sitting in St. Lucia on Tuesday made the decision citing apparent bias of the trial judge, Justice Brian Cottle. NDP is challenging the results of the December 9, 2015 general elections in Central Leeward and North Windward. The NDP is asking the court to declare them the winner of the elections in the contested districts or to order fresh elections. Justice Cottle had initially thrown out the petitions as improperly filed, but the NDP appealed that decision. After some delay, the appeal was heard in St. Lucia on Tuesday, that is Tuesday the 7th of March, and the Court of Appeal has reinstated the petitions. Then, the same day, another story appeared on Eyewitness News headed, Astafan Sorry, Respondents Lost, Petitions Appeal. And the story said, lead lawyer for the respondents in the election petitions brought by the main opposition New Democratic Party, Senior Counsel Anthony Astafan, on Tuesday apologized to Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves after the Court of Appeal ordered that the petitions be reinstated. That same day, Eyewitness News had another story. Court's decision to reinstate petition, quote, no political victory, unquote, for NDP, Gonsalves. And the story said Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves says that the Court of Appeal ruling on Tuesday that reinstated the main opposition New Democratic Party's 2 election petitions is not a victory for the opposition. Quote, I first of all put to rest this idea that they have scored some kind of a political victory. They have scored no political victory, he said, unquote. He said on Star FM, his Unity Labour Party's radio station. Quote, all what has happened, there was a legal skirmish in St. Lucia, and the Court of Appeal, the court said there was an appearance of bias. And then on the 9th of March, another story in Eyewitness News headed, Court ruling sends election petitions back to square one, Astafan. And this is what the story said, quote, the main lawyer for the respondents in the election petitions filed by the opposition New Democratic Party has put into context the implication of the appeal court's decision on Tuesday to reinstate the petitions. Quote, we are unfortunately and regrettably back literally to square one, where we have to go back to another judge and argue largely the same issues all over again to decide whether or not the petition should be struck out, Dominican Senior Counsel Anthony Astafan said on radio on Tuesday after the ruling. He said that celebrations by the opposition after the court decision are premature. Quote, there is no basis yet for them to celebrate because the petitions are still liable to be struck out on the hearing of the next application, Astafan said Tuesday on the ruling Unity Labour Party's radio station, Star FM. That same day, the 9th, Eyewitness News had another story headed, NDP lawyer confident of election petitions win. Story says, a lawyer representing the main opposition New Democratic Party says she is confident that the court will ultimately rule in their favor in the election petitions matter. Kebakos Batiste said that the NDP has a strong case, saying on Nice Radio Tuesday night that over 300 illegal ballots were counted in Central Leeward in the 9th December 2015 general elections. The lawyer further said that in North Windward, the petitioners can show that none of the ballot boxes were sealed properly according to law and that in the election, the ballot paper was not done according to law. The NDP is challenging the results of the elections in Central Leeward and North Windward. The petitions were given new life when the Court of Appeal ruled on Tuesday that High Court Judge Justice Brian Cutler showed apparent bias in the handling of the petitions, which he threw out last June as improperly filed. Then, on the 12th, yesterday, another story in Eyewitness News headed, Petitions Appeal Hearing, quote, disappointing, deflating, and depressing, unquote, for Astafan. And the story says, the lead lawyer for the respondents in the December 2015 petition case says that the developments in the appeal court that saw the petitions being reinstated on Tuesday was one of the worst days in his decades-old legal career. Quote, Let me make a confession on public radio for the first time in my life, in my 30-something years of practice, with the very successful record I have, that appearance in court on Tuesday was one of my most disappointing, deflating, and depressing days that I've ever had as a professional, unquote, Dominican Senior Counselor Anthony Astafan said Thursday on Boom FM. And also yesterday, Eyewitness News published a story headed Application to Throw Out Petitions, quote, incorrect and wrong, unquote. And the story says, a lawyer for the main opposition, the Democratic Party, in the 2015 election petitions case says that the respondent's application to strike out the petition as improperly filed was incorrect and wrong. Baptiste made the claim at an NDP press conference on Thursday, 2 days after the Court of Appeal reinstated the petitions and sent them back to the High Court for hearing by a different judge. The NDP is challenging the result of the vote in Central Leeward and North Windward in the December 9, 2015 general election. And the last entry which I have seen on Eyewitness News yesterday, I haven't got a chance to go on Eyewitness News today, but this one said, NDP wants petitions heard on their merit. Story says, the NDP is challenging the results of the vote in Central Leeward. The opposition, the Democratic Party, wants the two petitions it filed contesting the results of the December 2015 general elections to be heard on their merit. The respondent had convinced High Court Judge Justice Brian Cutler to throw out the petitions as improperly filed last June. But the Court of Appeal reinstated the petitions on Tuesday and sent them back to the High Court for hearing, saying that Cutler showed apparent bias in his handling of the case. It is widely anticipated that the respondents will again ask the court to throw out the petition. But lawyer Baptiste, speaking at an NDP press conference on Thursday, said that the right to vote is free and in free and fair elections is one of the most sacred and fundamental rights in a democratic society. Now, I would encourage anybody who has access to the internet to make it your business to follow Eyewitness News stories on general matters, but on these election petitions, because what has really happened is that in the 15 months since election, not much progress has been made on the legal front. We are literally back to square one, where you heard me read some of the extracts. One side is saying that they plan to raise the issue once again, that the petitions have not been properly filed, which is a procedural matter. And the other side is saying, let us forget about procedure and get on to substance. Or, if I don't want to misinterpret what they're saying they don't agree that the procedure was improper, and therefore let us get on to discuss in court the contents of the election petition. Now, one thing is certain. Whenever a new judge is appointed to sit and to hear the election petitions, he will make a decision. One side will win, one side will lose. And you know what is absolutely certain? Whichever side loses is likely to appeal. The Court of Appeal is due to come back to St. Vincent in May. Question is there enough time between now and May to have the case brought to court, heard, a decision given, and an appeal filed? I rather think not. The Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court authorities have not yet designated, as far as I know, when next the Court of Appeal is coming to St. Vincent after May this year. So that there is a possibility that nearly 2 years after the December 9th general elections, the country may still not know what is the outcome of the election petition. Now, all sorts of things could happen. There's nothing to stop the government dissolving parliament at any time and calling fresh elections in the whole country. That is one possibility, and the Prime Minister has hinted at that possibility already. So that there is a state of uncertainty in the country as to where are we with these election petitions. One side, the government side, based its arguments on procedure. They said the proper procedures were not followed in the filing of the petitions. The other side is saying, forget about procedure, we did follow the proper procedure, but in any event, here the substantive petition. But the irony of it all is that the petitions are themselves based on allegations of improper procedures in the handling of ballots and ballot boxes during and after the election. So that both sides are relying on improper procedures. Sadly, the Court of Appeal delivered an oral judgment, and we are still waiting for something in writing to really understand what decision they made in St. Lucia, because as you have seen, both sides have put their spin on it. Disappointing, because the country needs to know where we are going. And I hope both sides would get their act together and realize that it isn't good enough to have the country in that sort of suspense. It isn't good enough at all. It doesn't speak well for our maturity as a democracy. Hopefully, by the time I get back to speak to you next week, Monday, the Court of Appeal's decision may be in writing, in which I could read it and then make a further comment in it. But for the time being, uncertainty prevails, and I find it very disappointing. Both sides have to take their share of the blame. I'm not saying one side is right and the other side wrong. Both sides. So that is all from this program of the Law and You program number 855. Do have a pleasant, enjoyable, and meaningful National Heroes Day tomorrow. I look forward to being of further service to you next week, Monday DB, for another presentation in this public service nation-building series, The Law and You. Do have a pleasant week, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls, and may the good Lord continue to bless us all.
The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.